Fleet Commander Agran Essel stared at the holo display in front of him. Beams of light displayed a three-dimensional picture of the world near the center of the system. The size of the hologram filled the entire bridge with a radiant blue and green aura. It was a jewel and a sight for sore eyes after such a long search. Agran Essel's 4th Expeditionary Fleet had been searching fruitlessly for such a world for 5 cycles. The Honor Addict would be pleased with his discovery. This world would make a fine colony for the Aegyxis Empire. Agran opened his 3-pronged beak and let out a quick squawk of delight. The dagger-sharp spines that covered the inside of his hardened mandibles reflected the light of the holo-projector. Helmsman Oshik. He commanded one of the other bipedal aliens on the bridge. Take us into low orbit of this world. I desire a composite scan of the terrain and resources to present to the council. The smaller male squawked in reply and turned his attention to several smaller data screens, his talons arsing and tracing their way through the semi-transparent hologram. Commander Essel felt the short-range warp drive begin to power up. The huge fusion reactor that powered it hummed throughout the vessel. The other 4 ships of his expeditionary fleet followed suit. Agran felt his long spine-like feathers atop his head raise erect to the Aegyxa, a universal sign of pleasure. With a wave of his smaller hind arms, the commander switched the readout to display his small fleet stationed far from the center of the system. There were 8 planets in total, none nearly as rich as the third world from the center. Nearby, he noted that 2 small protoplanets orbited each other slowly as they made their long trek around the system's yellow star. Certainly, it was far from imperial space, but this system would make a fine present to his betrothed. He imagined her, his nestmate-to-be. She would be lounging on the sunlit branches of the monstrous trees of the Aegyxa homeworld. Perhaps she was tanning her downy white feathers right this moment. His memories of her touch had been the only solace on this hellishly long voyage. Not that he had ever felt anything for her. She was a comfort and a means to an end. Her father was the governor of 24 worlds, and if Agran played his cards right, someday he would be too. He glanced at the long-range scan of the planet. 2001. The thought caused the feathers atop his brownish head to rise even higher. "Sir," a high-pitched voice squawked from behind him. It was the tiny 3rd officer calling from his position at the rear of the bridge. Agran waited the customary moments before responding. So different was their status in society that it would be improper for his answer to come immediately. "Speak, maltling," he replied, using the semi-derogatory term for Aegyxa that had yet to undergo their 3rd molt before adulthood. "Sir," the 3rd officer repeated, youth betrayed by the screeching quality of his voice. "The world appears to be inhabited." He paused for a moment before adding, "A Class 1 species." Class 1. Barely spacefaring. The Aegyxis Empire's supreme governing body, the Honor Edict, had forbid the claiming of inhabited worlds, even if they were only occupied by such primitive life forms. The fleet commander felt his blood rising, a mixture of anger and annoyance. This was the 5th cycle of his fleet's colony search, an almost unheard of length of time to be away from the core worlds. He was tired, so very tired of all of this empty, desolate space. Now, here was a perfect target. It would make a fine gift to both the council and to his future nestmate. As per custom, he would be given governance over its lands and incomes. At least, he would have been given if it had been uninhabited. Then, a thought occurred to him. It grew quickly, and his frustration fed until the idea consumed him. It was a waste for such a lush planet to be controlled by beasts. If there were no beasts to be found, then there would be no problem. "The addict will be most pleased with my discovery." Agran clacked his powerful mandibles together in delight. "That world is uninhabited," he stated simply. 2 of his more experienced officers glanced at him, the flexed muscles on their brows betrayed their concern. They said nothing, however, and quickly looked away. They were smart. The commander was walking upon dangerous ground now. What he had just implied was genocide, and the honor edict had declared genocide a crime punishable by death. Still, Ajixa did not question their superior's orders. That too could become a death sentence. But the third officer spoke. It is inhabited by a Class 1 species. Poor Moltling, stupidity and inexperience will cost him dearly. Fleet Commander Agran Essel turned toward the young officer. By now, even he had realized his mistake. The officer's feathers lay sleek across his body, a submissive and fearful gesture. Calmly, Agran stepped toward the Moltling, wondering which highborn member of the Bade Orchixus had pulled strings to let one so young onto the bridge of a fleet ship. No matter, nothing, not even the council could save him now, even if it wasn't already 1,000 light years away. The sound of Agran's large foot talons clicking against the metal hull echoed in the otherwise silent bridge. Every other officer suddenly found their displays very interesting and turned away from what was about to take place. Reaching out, the commander wrapped the talons of his large upper arms around the third officer's throat. He lifted the poor boy effortlessly off the ground. When they were eye level, Agran reached forward with his hind talons, placing them on the soft underbelly of the Moltling. The warm feathers quivered at his touch. The young officer's eyes were filled with fear. "Please, no, please." The third officer mouthed the words, but no sound made it through Agran's talons, wrapped tightly around his throat. He would never speak another word. The commander would make sure of it. With all the patience in the galaxy, Agran Essel slowly dug his way into feather, flesh, and bone. The third officer screeched in agony. Soon, screeching became gurgling as internal organs ruptured, their contents spilling out onto the hull. When the third officer ceased convulsing a minute later, the commander dropped him with disgust. "Oshik," he said, without pause. "I said take us into orbit, now." After a second's pause, he added, "Begin charging all weapons." "Yes, sir." The commander was pleased. Soon, he would have his jewel, and if he was lucky, it would be the first of many more to come. It was his birthright to conquer. The edict may forbid genocide, but they are fools. Our empire was great before the decrees of imbeciles limited our future. I shall remove that limit. I shall reclaim glory through combat. In the darkness of space, 5 flashes of light briefly interrupted the profound darkness as the ships engaged their warp drives and disappeared. The author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.